Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society annual event. I'm your incoming board president and official annual event jazz pianist, Bill Walker, and I'm so pleased to be with you tonight. I'm going to play you some tunes before we start that have both a birding jazz theme to them. This one is inspired by a beverage that has a bird in its name. And let's see if any of you know this tune's name. So that tune is called Cold Duck Time, which is a beverage that might be nice in a summer evening like tonight. And yeah, fun tune, that one. Okay, next up, I would like to go to the bebop era of jazz and play you a tune called Au Privave. And there is a specific reason why I picked the music of this particular bebop saxophonist. And maybe if you know who it is, you can tell us why I picked this particular composer. That is the music of Charlie Parker, composer and saxophonist, and Au Prévave is the name of the tune. And those of you who know your jazz saxophone player nicknames will know that Charlie Parker is known as Bird. And so I thought that was a good tune for tonight. Yeah. All right. Well, there's two tunes to get you ready in the mood for the rest of our delightful program this evening. And now I'm going to hand it back to Matthew.
All right, that's great. So I love it how they, first of all, Bill's not here this evening. That was pre-recorded if you couldn't tell. And I love how the video, we sort of, all the suspects' identities were hidden to protect their innocence. So you couldn't see their faces in many cases. But anyway, technology. I'm so glad you're all here. This is going to be a great evening. We've got a good program going, and I want to introduce a few people. Not the least of which was Bill Walker, our incoming president. He's out of town at the moment, but was gracious enough to give us a pre-recorded musical opening and closing. We'll hear more from him at the end. We'll talk more about him a bit later. I want to welcome Carolyn Knight, who is the Education and Outreach Manager. For me, she's in the upper left there, wave. She'll be running the tech this evening and other things. And Barry, our outgoing president, wave, Barry. So he's been our president for 2 full years, and he's been on the board prior to that for a year. And he's just moved down to Central California, Central Coastal California, which I always call Southern California, and he hates it. But
don't call it Southern California. That's 5 miles further south.
Okay, 5 miles, right? Got it. So welcome everybody tonight. We've got a lot of things planned, and I just wanted to, before we get to the next item on the agenda, which will be election results, I just wanted to raise a glass and welcome you all here. So thank you so much for coming. And Barry, take it away and let us know what happened with the recent election.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. And thank you all, everybody, for coming. And it's really great to see all of you, or at least your names. I can't see faces for everybody. So board elections happen in June every year, as you may know. And we have an entire new slate of officers this year. For the board election, we sent out a message to all members, and 110 of you replied, which is a good number for our election. That's a pretty good return. And all of the board members were confirmed, and I would just like to introduce them all by name. I'm going to read them off to you. So we have 3 new members of the board this year. First off is Gary Campanella. And Gary is a former CFO for a healthcare nonprofit called OnLoc. He has a strong interest in our conservation and education programs. But since he knows so much about finance, he has also agreed to chair our finance committee, and he will be our new board treasurer this year, replacing Bob Hurt, who is the outgoing treasurer. Our second new board member is Michael Hawk. I don't know if Michael is here. Gary's here. I see you, Gary. Not sure if Michael is here tonight. Michael Hawk just left a high-tech Silicon Valley corporation to pursue conservation full-time. And one of the things he has done is joined our board. He's also a docent for the Open Space Authority. He's a big supporter of BioBlitzes, including our OSCSP BioBlitz down in Coyote Valley. And Michael interviews local ecologists and educators and conservationists and publishes those interviews in a podcast called Nature's Archive. And if you haven't checked out Nature's Archive, I highly recommend it. It's really excellent, very professional, and very relevant to the things that we do. Although it's more than just birding, it's all of nature and conservation. Michael is going to be our new board secretary this year, replacing Joan Leighton, who is our outgoing secretary. And our third new board member is Vivek Tiwari. Yes, we now have 2 Viveks on the board, Vivek Tiwari and Vivek Kanzote. Vivek is an executive in the semiconductor industry. He's a longtime member of SCVAS, and he's a bird photographer, which you may know. You may have seen some of his photography. And his son, Vayun, also is a well-known photographer who has won some awards for his bird photography. So I would love to welcome Gary, Michael, and Vivek to the board. Thank you all. And as part of the elections, we also had we have a whole new slate of board officers. I am the outgoing president. Bill Walker is the incoming president. If you don't know Bill already, he's a musician, as you may have just noticed. He's also a wildlife photographer, and he's a manager at a high-tech Silicon Valley corporation. Our vice president for this coming board year is Sue Pelder, and Sue is currently a lawyer, but she's had many different interesting careers. She's been a musician, she's been an audio engineer, she's been an engineer in water resources management. She loves natures and outdoors, and she's been on the board for several years now, and she's agreed to be vice president. And then our other two officers, Gary Campanella will be our treasurer, as I mentioned before, and Michael Hawk is our secretary. So that's our new board for this year. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. All right. So one thing we want to do tonight is recognize some of our amazing volunteers. First, I want to recognize Bob Hurt, who is leaving as the treasurer, leaving the board as the treasurer after 20 years on the board, or almost 20 years. So he's been a friend for a long time, and he's a powerful fundraiser and birdathon team leader for the Rock Wrens. He's also a CBC organizer for Mount Hamilton, and he was one of the reasons why I applied for this position at SCVAS. He's been a friend for a long time, and he said I ought to apply, and I did, and thank you, Bob, for that. I've enjoyed your support and your friendship all these years. And I know you're going to be around even if you're no longer the treasurer. So thank you for all of that. Joan Leighton has been the secretary. She's being replaced by Michael Hawk. She was a former class member of mine in the Palo Alto class years ago, along with Phil Leighton, her husband. So they've been a longtime friends, and I'm so happy to have had a chance to work with her on the board. She takes incredible notes and has an amazing memory. So I just know that's not an easy position, and she's done a fabulous job. I want to recognize Teresa Chang, who has joined us as the new photo archivist, and she's also on the field trip committee. She's doing a fabulous job putting all the hundreds of photographs that we're getting that trickle in from all the photographers in our membership, and there are so many. We frequently need specific photographs. So you might look for messages from Teresa in the future asking for, let's say, a molting young male brown-headed cowbird. That's something we don't have a really good picture of, or at least we didn't until recently. So you may find that you've got some of those photos in your archive, and she'll make sure that it's put there for us to use in the newsletter and on our website. Annie Yang has just joined, who's come on as the Environmental Action Committee's chair. So she's doing a fantastic job of getting news out, organizing the agendas, keeping the meetings going, and we're so lucky to have her in that position. That is a very tough job, and we're fortunate to have her. And Rashi Sharma is a Los Altos High School student who has come to become a very strong advocate for us. She recently made an appearance at the Palo Alto City Council meeting about light pollution, and we've recorded that session, and you can find it on our website. She's articulate, poised, and just a wonderful addition to our committee, and we're so lucky to have her on our side, advocating for limited light pollution and other issues. And finally, Bill Walker. You've heard his fantastic musical talents. He's been with us for years, and he's frequently provided music for our events, and I'm so glad he's going to be the president now. Really looking forward to working with him. And I love hearing his Friday night jazz sessions on YouTube, which appear every week. And I'm just glad that he's going to be here. I'm sorry he can't be here tonight in person, but you'll get to hear again from him in a moment. So those are the volunteers, unless I've forgotten somebody. Well, Barry, I've got to mention Barry. Barry has become a very close friend through our work together on the board as the board president and me, the executive director. He's promised to stay in touch and be present. He'll remain on the board, but not as the president. and just so lucky to have got to know him and Ginger, and look forward to many more years in the future and our developing friendship. So thank you, Barry. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Joan. I don't see you here. Thank you, Rashi. Thank you, Teresa and Annie, all of you. So with that, Carolyn, tell us about some of the highlights from this year.
Yeah, so it has been a surprisingly busy year. I'm going to start with environmental advocacy, and then we'll move through our chapter's activities. But as some of you may be aware, either because you're on our advocacy alert email lists, and if you're not and you're interested in joining, you can sign up for those through our website, and we will put you on the list for your city specifically, so you're not getting emails for every single city within Santa Clara County. But we've had some really impressive wins for environmental advocacy. There's a lot of bad news on the news and on our minds right now, so it's nice to be able to celebrate some wins. So locally, Coyote Valley protections have been sustained. So the zoning for Coyote Valley, which was in question, there was some serious movements to moving it to industrial zoning, which would have allowed really high capacity warehouses right in the middle of some very important protected open space. The City Council of San Jose has decided to keep that zoning for open space and agriculture. So that's a massive win for wildlife corridors, for our birds that rely on that habitat, as well as just for open space access for our community. We also had a really big win with the city of Cupertino. They created dark sky and bird safe design ordinances within their city. We've had some successes with wildlife movement within Santa Clara County. There's now funding to study for potential placements for a wildlife crossing bridge within Pacheco Pass. So many of us have driven that on our way to the Central Valley. It's a very dangerous crossing for wildlife, but it also has the potential for allowing a massive amount of movement for our local wildlife, including things like tool elk. A little bit closer to home, we've had some successes with protecting the newts at Lexington Reservoir. And then an upcoming success, there is a city bill, or not a city bill, a state bill that is going to be working towards creating dark sky ordinances for the state of California. So that information is on our Facebook page as well as our website if you want to learn more. I really recommend looking into that. As many of you know, we've had in-person field trips this year, which has been very exciting. I want to thank each and every one of you, whether you are a field trip leader or a participant, for your patience as we got back into the swing of things with that, with the waiver processes and with the trip limitations. But despite all of those hurdles, Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society managed to host more than 100 field trips this year throughout Santa Clara County and in fact beyond. So I want to thank everybody, whether you just took part as a participant and you were a friendly birding face, or whether you led one, maybe you contributed to our self-guided field trips page, which also has more than 100 locations on it now, which is really, really impressive. We're looking forward to doing more next year. And I want to thank you all for taking part in that. In the world of education, we worked with about 40 classes this year. That's with the Wetlands Discovery Program, as well as our one-off in-class presentations or just bird walks. That helped us serve about 900 students, primarily in the elementary school age range. We also got to do education programs through the San Jose Public Library. So those were completely free to the public, for adults as well as for children, to help introduce birding and just birds to the public. We've been involved in tabling events at cities including Los Altos Hills, in San Jose, most recently in Sunnyvale. We are going to be posting our tabling events on our events calendar. So if you want to explore your local community, stop by a downtown area, and maybe say hi to us as well, those opportunities are going to be available to you. We also did 3 Let's Go Birding Together trips. These are under the flag of National Audubon, but they are inclusive birding events, specifically designed to create and foster a safe space within the LGBT and its allies. So that's been an amazing partnership. We've partnered with more than a dozen environmental and community groups throughout our county. We're looking forward to expanding that number next year. I'm also going to take a minute to invite everybody to take part, or at least look into, our Oak Savannah Community Science Project. So this is something you may remember us mentioning last year. It was a really big win to get this grant from the Open Space Authority. This project is located in the North Coyote Valley, more specifically in the North Coyote Valley Conservation Area. So if you want to search the area in Google, that's what you're going to be putting in. It involves monthly bird surveys, which happen on Wednesdays, once a month, first thing in the morning, but they are open to the public. So if you are interested in joining, please shoot me an email. They also include bio-blitzes, which are at a much friendlier time on Saturdays. We do post those at least a month in advance on our event calendar. They're open to the public. Every ages 4 and up are welcome. We use iNaturalist to explore the site. This is a really amazing project because we've been able to find some really fascinating birds. We just got Lawrence's goldfinches. We've found nesting rufous crowned sparrows at this site. It's a wintering location for ferruginous hawks. We've had merlins and prairie falcons, as well as the kestrels and the peregrines, both species of eagles. If you want to do just some fun birding, or maybe you want to learn a little bit about the bees and the butterflies, and maybe some of the flora that's happening within our Oak Savannah habitat, the bio-blitzes are a really low pressure, friendly way to go about it. You don't have to know anything about it. You just need to show up and be excited to learn. And invariably, you'll learn at least 1 or 2 new species throughout your day there. So we've actually got a bio blitz coming up on August 20th. I just dropped the RSVP link to that. I do recommend RSVPing because it is a closed site. We cannot keep the gates open. So we start pretty much on time. So within 15 minutes, people are going to be scattered to the 4 winds. Knowing how many people to expect is very handy. For this project, we've recently found a volunteer who is going to be helping us build curriculum. He is a local middle school science teacher with experience in teaching in high school with environmental science. We're really looking forward to working on that to build a high school curriculum that we can present to local high schools to get high school students out at the site, gathering their own data, and then working towards building their skills at asking the questions that will lead them to either discovering things like what habitat's carrying capacity are, giving them the opportunity to analyze the data that not just they and their classmates collected, but that was also collected over all of these bio blitzes and surveys that we've been doing over the past year. So this is a project we're really excited about. If you're interested, I really do recommend checking it out. You can email me if you have any questions or if you're interested in taking part. I'm going to put my email into the chat. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Matthew.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. What an awesome year it's been. I can't speak highly enough about the OSCSP. That's the Savannah Community Science Program that she was just speaking about. The BioBlitzes are a blast, and we have a nearly perfect record of finding a new species of bird for our checklist on every single visit. If you think about that, we have 111, 112 species on the bird list already. And there are still some birds that we're hoping to discover there, and the possibility that high schoolers will discover it for our project is just amazing. I love the BioBlitzes and I love the bird surveys. Please consider coming, get to know this beautiful area and help us with this project. And Carolyn is doing a masterful job of pulling it all together and organizing it, so I know you'll enjoy it. Some other opportunities this year. The Ed Committee, the Education Committee, obviously could use some help with the Wetlands Discovery Program and this new Oak Savannah Community Science Program, OSCSP. We're always looking for volunteers to help out with that in any capacity. And also the EA Committee, the Environmental Action Committee, is always looking for people to be advocates at local city council meetings and to help draft letters and send letters and communicate with the public. We'd love to have more people on the committee, and you can contact us about that. I am personally looking for somebody to help manage the content on the Avocet quarterly newsletter. It's a challenge. It's not particularly difficult, but it's time consuming, and I would love to have somebody help me out with that. And we're still looking for field trip leaders. I'm sure that's pretty obvious. We have more interest in our field trips than we have leaders. So if any of you feel that you have knowledge or interest or just excitement about a location and you'd be interested in leading a trip, talk to Eve Meyer or talk to me, and we'll figure out how to get you in there, because that'd be a huge help. And finally, in 2025, that's just 3 years away, we're going to be celebrating our centennial. So we're going to be assembling a Centennial Committee, which will be in charge of figuring out how to celebrate this amazing landmark. Very few chapters in the United States have the privilege of celebrating their 100th anniversary. I can think of only one or two that have hit that landmark. We were founded in 1925. It's been almost an entire century of successes. We've grown continuously. In the past 3 years, we've had a 38% increase in our membership, where our trajectory is straight up. The chapter is growing. It's doing wonderful things. There's a lot to celebrate. And part of the celebration will probably be a birding festival, a multi-day festival. So if you're interested in helping out with that, or brainstorming, or in any way being a part of that, let me know. I'd love to talk to you, and we'll set up a time to get a few of us together, either in person or remote, and talk about some new fun ideas for this fantastic celebration. So that's the first part of the program, and we're going to get to the most fun part right now. We're going to have an interview, which I've titled Freshly Seasoned. And the reason for that is I listen to KQED a lot and listen to Fresh Air all the time, and I thought there's something in there that we can use. Freshly Seasoned is an interview with Bob Hurt and Carter Gazarowski, both fantastic birders, one somewhat older than the other, one somewhat younger, and they have vastly different perspectives, and they have a lot to tell us about. But I want to introduce them first before I ask the questions. So Carter, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to introduce you. I learned your name first on South Bay Birds. I didn't know who you were. You just seemed like a new name. You seem extremely knowledgeable and very gracious with your knowledge, and also very generous with your knowledge, and gracious when helping others learn from the community. And you're also eager to accept advice and information from others. I mean, you're basically the perfect birder. You're a photographer. You play the flute and the piccolo. What level are you in school?
I'm going to be a junior next year in high school.
Okay, fantastic. So you got start birding a little bit earlier than I did, and it's clear that those additional years put you way ahead of where I was when I was a junior in high school. Oh, you also play tennis too, which is I just learned the other day. So kind of an amazing young man. So we're going to talk to Carter in a moment, and we're going to talk to Bob, who, as I've mentioned before, I've known for years. He helped me apply. He encouraged me to apply for this position at SCVAS. He's been birding since the 70s, been bird watching since the 50s. He makes a distinction between those two, which he'll probably tell us about. He was the organizer of Pterodroma pelagic trips out of Monterey, I believe. It routinely went on deep sea voyages in search of rare pelagic species. So he has a lot of experience offshore and on land. For years, he led trips for Audubon to Honey Lake in search of greater sage grouse. So an amazing resource for information, a generous person with his knowledge, a kind person, and easy to talk to, and so much fun to bird with. And I could say the same thing about Carter. So Bob, I want to start with you, if I might. Tell us how and when you started birding, and what you had a spark bird or a spark experience that really made it mandatory for you to continue.
Well, yeah, like I say, I make a distinction between bird watching, which I think is the love of just watching the beauty and elegance of birds, period, without any of the statistics behind it or any of the technical stuff, just enjoying the birds themselves. And I've been doing that since I was 8 years old. My dad had a bird book, a pair of binoculars and feeders. And whenever something unusual came into the yard, he would write down the date and what it was. And he'd call everybody to the window, and we'd look in the binoculars. And spark birds, I guess, cedar waxwings, when you finally see them up close and through binoculars, are fabulous birds. And, we didn't have that many incredible birds, but we'd get excited if a pheasant would trot through the backyard. So it was a lot of fun. I took that enjoyment and just the fact that I wanted to know what these things were, that whether it was trees or plants or flowers, I wanted to know what they were, and I wanted to put a name on them. So, that was sort of the beginning of it. But birding didn't really occur until I got to California. I'd picked up, when I was in the Navy, I picked up a pair of binoculars at the Navy Exchange and bought the old Golden Guide, if you can remember that thing. Yeah. And I kept it all the way through that time, and I would write down anything I saw in the date in the book, and it's the same old book. And like I say, I'm not a lister, but I do sort of keep track of it. My Golden Guide is swelled with marginal notes because the birds we were seeing birds afterwards that aren't in the book, so you had to really make an effort. But I got out here and I got birding with a guy I worked with, and he turned it into a competition before I knew anything was going on. And we went on a trip to the Sierra backpacking, and I was in charge of recording the number of birds, and he was in charge of mammals or something easy. And we got back, and he said, I think how many species of birds did we see? And I told him, I said, I think we had about 23 or 24 species on the backpacking trip. And he said, well, I went out last weekend and I saw 20 more species. So I've got now 45 species. And I said, okay, let me see what might be. I went out in my neighborhood, came back, I had 75 by the time I talked to him next. And we went back and forth like that for a while. And at one point in time, he said, I've got 130. I said, well, how did you get up to that? He said, well, I went on an Audubon Society field trip, and we saw a lot of birds that you hadn't seen before. I said, well, I'm going to do the same thing. So I joined Audubon and caught up with it and passed them again. So that was the beginning of birding for me. Yeah. And what was the trigger bird? It was more of a trigger of a competition. And that's what I say, the difference between keeping a list and competing with the other people. That's kind of the fun. That's the sport.
Yeah.
And bird watching is just sitting back and enjoying. Birding, I don't like to do solo. Bird watching, I enjoy doing solo.
Yeah.
I like the social aspects of birding.
Well, let's hear from Carter a little bit. So, how did you get started? When did you get started? And what was your spark bird or experience?
I think that's just a wonderful story that Bob told about the competition and starting with those birds on the feeder. And I think it's a little bit similar for me. My mom's ex-boss and good friend from Texas is an avid birder. He's traveled across North America, has a pretty large life list. And she was very sweet. When I was very little, like only about 2 years old, she got together a bunch of photos of birds around California that I might see. And she put them together in this little like photo album and put a piece of paper with the bird's name and what it ate and mailed it all the way from Texas to California as a Christmas present for me when I was little, only 2 years old. And then obviously it's too young for me to remember, but my mom has a photo of it. I'm laying on the bed about 2.5 years old and just looking at all the photos of birds. And maybe like that just subconsciously started to spark, because I do remember every so often I'd take it off the shelf and look through that book and see all the birds. Then one day my mom got kind of a real field guide for me. And I saw, not long after that, I was looking out the window and I saw a bird land on the lawn chair, and it was black, had a crest, white belly, was flicking its tail. And I looked through the book and I ran to tell my mom. I was so excited. I was like, Mommy, I saw a black-bill ebba. So I didn't know how to pronounce it. Yeah.
Great story.
Yes. And then that was about when I was 5.5-ish. And then ever since then, I think I just got hooked on birding and was loving it. And I also really like, Bob, your distinction between birding and bird watching. I've been bird watching probably since then. And then really just in 2020 when COVID hit, had so much more time. Mm-hmm. And then I was just at home all day. I would look at so many different resources, learn from so many knowledgeable people in our local community and in the national community, and really started to want to learn as much as I could about identification. Then in 2021, I'm like, okay, never going to have this much free time again in my life, probably. So then just decided to do like a big year in Santa Clara County, which I just had so much fun just getting to know the county. But more importantly than that, it was all the wonderful people I met along the way, like just going to a rarity stakeout, and there'd be so many people there just eager and excited to help me find the bird. And it was even more satisfying to repay the favor and show a bird that someone had never seen before and just see their face light up with the same excitement that so many other people had brought to me by all the help they'd given me. Yeah. So I think that's really what started me and always keeps me interested in birding.
You both actually kind of answered the first two questions, really. We've talked about how it was you got started and what your spark experience was, but you've also told us what you really love about birding. Bob, you and I share something, and the ability to put a name on a bird is kind of what got me started when I identified my first cardinal. That was magic at the time. And Carter, you're talking about meeting people and seeing the beauty of the birds, your challenge, your big year in Santa Clara County. What was your total, your finishing number? Do you recall?
Well, in the end, I got to 253 for 2021 in Santa Clara. And, I didn't really come up with the idea to go for a high number until like later on in the year when I realized I was getting up there. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, okay, and then I set 250 as a goal.
I remember
that. So yeah, wonderful, exciting. And then you were there on the evening when I got to 250th bird, the short-eared owl at Bixby Park. Mm-hmm. That was just so exciting. And then I kept going after that and got the 3 more, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. The annual big year or the county year, I didn't used to to participate in that very much, but eBird made it so easy to see how many birds you've seen in a year or in a county, and now I definitely do it each year, and I try to keep the competition only with myself. You know, like, can I surpass my last year? But sometimes that competition creeps in a little bit too, and we start competing with other birders, and that's fun too. You meet a lot of people. So my next question is, how do you, Bob, how do you think that we can empower more birders like yourselves? I mean, what do veteran birders like yourself, what are you looking for in Audubon? What are you looking for in field trips? How can we keep that energy that you have now going indefinitely?
Well, I think, like I mentioned, I think in high school, I think there's a lot of a competitive feeling that wells up inside you. So, if we could get a high school team versus another high school team, if we could, it would almost be like a high school sport. And I think that would bring so many people in, and it would open so many eyes to the wonder of birding and the competition. You gotta get over the fact that, yeah, we're just looking at birds, and you got to get beyond that and say, yeah, but we're going to beat that other high school, whether it's Cupertino versus Lynbrook or whatever, or down here Pioneer versus some Lowell or some other team. I just think that that's pretty important. I've gotten obviously past that now, and I just think it'd be a lot of fun to get the kids board in that, and of course they'd automatically learn. And once you're out there, you're going to get an appreciation for nature and habitat protection and all the things that we think are really critical.
I think we could take that idea and turn it into a company versus company sort of competition too, like a Facebook team versus a LinkedIn team or a Google team. We've got birders that work in each of those companies. If we could get them to compete with each other, I think that would be really exciting. Facebook has got the rooftop, which is quite a good birding location. But anyway, that would be great. And Carter, what do you think that the rest of us can do to encourage and empower young birders like yourself?
I think that the birding community, once I got involved, was just already so wonderful and encouraging and empowering, as you said. Like, for example, during the big year that I was doing, frequently, like, people who were above me in ranking would go out of their way to let me know about rare birds that I needed for my list and where to find them and help me find them. And that happened for so many people, and that was really nice. And just the wealth of knowledge that I learned from pretty much all the people on this call tonight, I recognize. And another wonderful thing is how I remember when Massimo first proposed the idea of the Discord server to South Bay Birds, it was initially met with a little bit of pushback from people who maybe don't see, who are happy with the way things are. And then the way that the leaders of the community just absolutely rallied behind him and the young spirit and made that new Discord server we have, wonderful community. And we've had so many good discussions there. It's a great place for especially younger birders to interact and understand more of what the birding community is like, especially if it's hard to find the time to go on a field trip or something like that. You can just do that right from your own home. So I think that's been really wonderful.
Yeah, I think the Discord idea and the execution of it has been spectacular for the entire community, old and young. But what I'm hearing from you is that it's the openness of the community to talk to and learn from each other. And I think that's, many of us kind of go into a birding zone where we put our blinders on, we focus quietly on our quest. And I've come to really try to come out of that and and talk to people, talk to everybody I meet. Did you know that this is right over there, or what are you looking for today? And I've had so many wonderful conversations, and I know you have too. So that's encouraging. You don't feel like the young birding community is held back in any way. It's being encouraged by people around you. Sounds like.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, good.
Mhm.
All
Yeah.
right. So both of you, Bob, have you had a favorite encounter with a younger birder?
Oh yeah. Recently, right now my favorite encounter is finding a bench to sit on. But my favorite encounter with younger birders, like we were looking for the Williamson sapsucker, and Ozzy Alphas, he was running all over the place. He was just going. There's no way I could keep up, but he found them several times. It would move, and he'd find it. I think it was Carter found the black pole a couple times. We couldn't see where it had gone. Another young birder was the first one to spot the bay-breasted warbler that was over in Vistona. So I just love hanging around the younger birders because they've got the energy. They're going to find the bird. They got great eyes and great ears.
I think that was Max
Max
Benningfield.
Yeah,
Max Benningfield. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Carter, have you had a favorite encounter with an older birder in your career as a birder?
Oh, I have, yeah. And this was a long time ago when I was first getting started in birding. It's probably, must have been like 10 at the time, long before I was on South Bay Birds or met Matthew or anyone here. And I was with Jana Pauser, who we'd met. Well, first I should give the story of just how wonderful she was to us. My mom's friends from Texas who made me the bird book were coming, and she needed Vos Swift or Vox's Swift for her life list. And then my mom was just on South Bay Birds and saw that Jana had posted that Vox's Swifts were at Las Capitancios ponds, but I didn't have a whole lot of description. So then my mom just emails Jana, and Jana has no idea who this woman is. And she just gives the most wonderfully descriptive reply of where to find him. And then she says, "Oh yeah, I'll be here at this time if you want me to help you go look for him." And we're like, "Oh wow, okay."
Oh, that's
just a second. I think my dog wants to get on the call too.
Yeah, Jana is truly wonderful. She was spoken at the Birdathon wrap up, and she's been a birder for a good many years. Do you have any closing thoughts, either of you? Bob, any closing thoughts about what young birders and old birders can learn from each other? Or
well, yeah, I just think we have to go out there and do our best each and every day, and get out there. You're out there enjoying nature. Share your knowledge. Share the location of the bird. Share anything you can, and be social. Just have fun with this, and then take that appreciation and turn it into conservation.
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's so well said.
Carter, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think the thing that makes birding me is sometimes it is great to just relax and be peaceful with only nature around you. But the thing that really makes birding wonderful for me is just the people. And I think it's great to just keep that in mind and remember that's the most important thing. It's always good to talk to people you meet and make a connection. And that just makes any of the birds you see just even more wonderful and more memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a social community, and we do each other a real service when we remember that and open ourselves up to other people's ideas and share our knowledge. So I want to thank you both for being here tonight and answering these silly questions, because you did both such a great job of summarizing your perspective and sharing your enthusiasm and your love of this pursuit, this birding that we all love so much. So thank you both. We'll do this again, and but you've done exactly what I hope you would do. and really enlightened us all. So with that, yes, Bob?
Thank you for having us. It was our pleasure.
It was
my pleasure.
Oh yeah. And one last thought on Bob. Just the last thought on Bob's spirit of competition. The fledglings Birdathon team are coming to get #1 from the Rockbends in the next Birdathon.
Yeah, I do it. That's great. Watch out, Bob. All right, so let's.
The rocks are gathering a little moss, so they'll probably.
Well, yeah, maybe. Anyway, that's good to know. There's the challenge is alive and well. So the next thing we want to do is we want to open up the auction. So Barry, take us through the auction site and tell us how to place a bid.
Thank you, Matthew. So yes, speaking of fundraising, we have an auction associated with tonight's annual event, and I'm excited to show it to you. I'm going to give you a really quick demo of the auction site, but I just wanted to say that this particular auction, all of the funds are going to go towards SCVAS's operations, most specifically the production of the Avocet newsletter, the Avocet updates that we do, the annual reports, and the checklists that we create, and all the other documents that we create that are helpful for everybody's birding efforts. So let me share my screen. And the auction site looks like this. We have 2 local, well-known artists who have donated some of their amazing original artwork to our auction this year. Jack Cole, I'll do it in the order that it's listed here. John Muir Laws, or Jack Laws as we know him, is a well-known nature journalist. He has been a big supporter of SCVAS for many years. I've seen some of his original artwork on our previous 2 auctions. And they're really popular. And these are the actual original drawings or watercolors that Jack Laws used in his published book, the Birds of the Sierra Nevadas, or is it The Nature of Sierra Nevada? Matthew.
Nature. Yeah, it's wildlife.
It's nature. It's the Nature of Sierra Nevada.
So
it covers all of the birds that you'd find in the Sierras, many of which, of course, are here as well. And I'll show you some pictures. And then Jack Cole is an artist who does woodworking, and he has been creating beautiful wooden renditions of lots and lots of different birds, but mostly waterfowl. And he has donated a wonderful collection of his original works to us, and we're making them available now in small batches in our auctions. So the auction site looks like this. You'll see the annual event image, so you know you're at the right auction. We're going to post a link to this in the chat for this meeting at the end of the meeting, and also on the homepage on scvas.org. The top item will be a link to this auction. The auction goes live at 8 p.m. So I'm just going to click on View All Items here. There are only 16 items, and it's just a mix of lovely hand-carved waterfowl from Jack Cole. So this is the Pacific loon. You can see the lovely detail. And these are about 10 to 12 inches long, and they just look beautiful. And let me go back, and I'll just click on the warblers here. This is a page of warblers. And if you've ever seen the Birds or the Nature of the Sierra Nevada book, you'll recognize these are the exact same images that were used in that book. But these are the originals. You can see the pencil sketches, you can see the erase marks and everything. And they're just gorgeous to behold. So bidding is very simple. This is this auction site, 32 Auctions, is one that's been used by other nonprofits. We think it's a really good site, and I want to hear feedback from you guys if you're having any trouble with it or and things you like about it. And if we like it, we'll continue to use it in the future. But when the auction goes live, there will be a bid button that shows up right here in the middle of the screen, and you can bid on items. You can also favorite items, keep track of items that you haven't bid on. But if you do bid on an item, as soon as you get outbid, you'll get a notification. You'll get an email notification. So it should be very much more dynamic than last year's auction, where we were updating the bids by hand. So that is that is our auction. And I'm going to hand it back to you, Matthew. That was
Great.
all I think I needed to say about it.
Yeah, and he'll post the link immediately after my next presentation. But I wanted to show you, this is the book from which these paintings are taken. And we just saw this one, the warblers. We just saw some of these warblers, the originals, on the scan. So because this is a fundraiser, we're hoping that the bidding is competitive. I know for a fact that Barry really wants to have the northern pintail wood carving. So just keep that in mind. You won't tell me what his upper bid.
I'm going to outbid you all. No, I know Matthew is also interested in this pintail, so you might want to just watch that auction for see what happens.
Yeah, sparks are gonna fly.
I've seen the pintail. Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous.
So anyway, I know we're running a little bit over our time, but I have a little presentation I'd like to share with you. So let me see. Now, is this progressing? Did you see this back and forth?
Yes.
Very okay. So this is we've got shorebird migration coming up. So this is shorebirds lite. Get ready for the late summer push. And if you've been watching shorebirds for a while, you already know what this bird is, but we'll talk about that one later. First question is, are summer doldrums real? And I'm trusting you're seeing the slides progress. My feeling is 2 years ago, I wrote an article for the Advocacy, summer of 2020. And in the what to look for column, I had something called froth. And froth, in my mind, is just a phenomenon immediately after migration, spring migration. That's immediately after spring migration, where the birds end up where they're supposed to be. That would just think of the birds as being the water. And we don't expect much to happen after that. But if you stand and watch the tide pool after the incoming tide, you see the froth kind of glide around slowly, and it continues to move with the momentum of the waves, and yet the water really hasn't changed. That froth is the way I look at birds like the black tern that showed up at Shoreline Lake. This is not a common bird. In fact, it's rare here, and we've seen it fairly early each summer for the past this year and last year. So this to me is a perfect example of that froth, these surprises that continue to move after the bulk of migration takes place in early spring. Another wonderful bird, rose-breasted grosbeak, discovered on one of our field trips. I think Allison Turner discovered it on a trip that was being led by Eve Meyer at Almaden Lake. Probably many of you have seen both of these birds. And then, of course, we can't talk about recent excitement without mentioning the leased bittern, which was discovered by Mike Mammoser, and also I think Kevin Jin reported the very same day. I think they were not aware of each other's reports. This is an exciting discovery. First time the bird has recorded breeding in this county. Very exciting news. We don't get a new county bird, a new county breeding bird often at all. So big news. Some of the things that affect these changes, these surprises, they're widely diverse. And we've got climate change, we have the availability of habitat and food, and we have this historic drought. Any one of these might possibly explain or partially explain the arrival of some of these birds, but we don't really know exactly which of these influences the strongest. All we know is that we have this froth experience in summertime. So my answer to the question is no, the summer doldrums are not real by any stretch. If you look at our checklist, you see that the July-August time period is especially interesting. We've got Arctic breeders that are returning to our area for the winter. So this is really noticeable with the shorebirds. And this particular section of the checklist shows us 5 kind of target species that most birders want to find in late summer. Many of them will continue through fall, but not all of them. So these are the ones that we're going to be looking at today. Much of the same phenomenon occurs with terns. We've got leased tern, black tern, common tern, all of which tend to show up in late summer. Of course, we have the black tern already. But common tern and least tern haven't yet been seen in the county this season. So those are two birds to look for. But for tonight, we're going to be talking about sandpipers. One of the most important things about a late summer shorebirding is to recognize juvenile plumage. And if you're curious about the spelling of juvenile, juvenile is the adjective. Juvenile plumage. Juvenile is what has juvenile plumage. So a juvenile bird has juvenile plumage. Juvenile plumage, this is typical. And during this presentation, you'll see birds that are labeled A, B, C, etc. That's your opportunity to take a guess, test yourself if you recognize these birds. We have two juvenile birds here, juvenile birds, each showing this wonderful sort of scaly plumage, this colorful, fresh, wonderful, organized, tidy plumage, the juvenile plumage. We have Western Sandpiper on the left and Leased Sandpiper on the right. There are a number of features that we could use, and we'll get into those momentarily. Looking at a late summer adult Leased Sandpiper, you see the breeding plumage is starting to wear away. It's starting to drab out a little bit. By winter, and many of our late summer adult Leased Sandpipers look very much like this now. As we go through this season, they're going to dull out even further. Those feathers are going to become kind of ragged. They're going to start to look worn and disorganized. This is very typical. Imagine they've spent the entire season feeding young and caring for the nest and defending territory. So they're exhausted, and their plumage is exhausted too. The juveniles, however, are all wearing the freshest of fresh plumage. They are colorful, they're neatly organized, and all the feathers are in perfect condition. This is how you recognize a juvenile bird. It's interesting how similar the Leased Sandpiper is to the Pectoral Sandpiper as far as color. Both of the juveniles have this neat scaly pattern, this sort of beautiful beaded texture on the back of tidy feathers, very colorful. But there's a huge difference in size between Pectoral Sandpiper and Leased Sandpiper. So if you haven't already guessed, Pectoral Sandpiper is the large bird on the left, Leased Sandpiper is on the right. The pectoral is a juvenile bird in this picture. The least is an adult, which is kind of showing that older worn feathers. Baird's sandpiper is probably my favorite sandpiper to look for in late summer. It's a long distance migrant. It's fairly early in its arrival here. And I just love the proportions and the shape of this bird and the pattern on the back. You'll notice that those primary feathers are very, very long. They extend well beyond the tertials. This is actually a very useful field mark. So let's talk about how to compare some of the species, Western and Leased sandpipers. This is probably everybody's first challenge in sandpiper watching. You see the three age groups that I just mentioned, the fall adult or the late summer adult, the winter adults, which to me, I always call these brownies. They're kind of tan and brown. And the fall juvenile is very pretty with red highlights and tidy feathers. There's a general sort of golden brownish coloration here. When you look at the Western sandpiper, you see something else, something kind of frosty. So the winter adults are quite pale and quite gray, and the juveniles are very, very pale on the underside and throat and face. They have what I like to call the red suspenders on the back right here. If you see that feature, you're looking at one of these juvenile late summer Western sandpipers. The breeding birds and the fall birds tend to retain some color, but usually it becomes frosty gray fairly soon afterward. Maybe you can tell which is which here. One of them is frosty and one of them is brownish or tannish. Maybe you also notice the leg color, which is important. So if you hadn't already guessed, we've got Western sandpiper and Leased sandpiper here. Leased sandpiper and Pectoral sandpiper. As I mentioned a moment ago, the plumages of the juveniles are shockingly similar. And you'd be surprised how often people will wrongly post a picture of one when it's actually the other bird. It's an easy mistake to make. You can see how similar they are. But I notice the very, very long primary feathers on the pectoral, the brighter yellowish legs, and there tends to be pretty conspicuous yellowish on the bill. Also look at the difference in the size of the head compared to the body. This is an indication that the bird with the smaller head is a larger bird. There are good reasons behind that, but I'll just leave it at that for the moment. And once again, we see the pectoral sandpiper and the leased sandpiper here. And perhaps you already know which is which. Pectoral sandpiper is a lot bigger and yet looks very similar to the leased. I like to call the pectoral sandpipers the greater leased sandpiper because they look so similar, but they're about twice as large. The juvenile birds of the pectoral sandpiper are all very pretty and very colorful. Good examples here of how that plumage can vary. The one on the left is a little golden. The one on the right upper is very rufous, and the one down below is kind of lacking some of the golden color. Western and semi-palmated sandpipers. Again here, the western sandpiper, the frosty bird with the red suspenders and that fairly long bill and black legs. The semi-palmated sandpiper, it has very little color. Actually, it's very gray overall, with just a hint of warm tones, but nothing like the red suspenders. And look how short that bill is on the right-hand bird, the semi-palmated sandpiper. Short and blunt. Because the bill is so much longer on the western sandpiper, and it tends to sort of lean forward like this, I always like to compare it to a gnome. In fact, this is not my idea. This was Pete Dunn's idea in his essential companion to the field guide. The gnome has a big head and is front heavy, and if you imagine the way this little toy would work, he would lean forward sort of awkwardly, looking very front heavy. And to me, that's sort of the way a western sandpiper looks. That's a subtle but important structural difference. The semi-palmated is more centrally balanced and does not seem as front heavy. Barred sandpiper, as I mentioned, it's got this beautiful pattern on the back, the very, very long primary feathers that extend well beyond the tertials. And here we have another example. Look how long those feathers are and how stretched that bird looks. I call it the long peep because of that. Perhaps you can tell which is which here. One of them looks much longer than the other, and that, of course, would be the Baird's sandpiper on the left and western sandpiper on the right. Now we've got a Baird sandpiper in this picture, and we also have another bird that looks quite a bit larger that also has long primaries. This is a little bit tougher, but we have a pectoral sandpiper on the upper bird and the Baird sandpiper down below. They both show a bit of a bib, don't they? So what we're seeing here is the value of comparing the size between the Baird sandpiper and the pectoral sandpiper and the pectoral sandpiper and the leased sandpiper. Noticing the size is very important because many of the other features are similar. Again, here, the pectoral sandpiper on the left and the leased sandpiper on the right. In isolation, separated from all other birds, it can be surprisingly difficult to tell these two apart. Let's take a look at the ruff. Ruff is an old world species that we tend to get every fall and or winter, and we tend to see juveniles. They have a pretty short bill compared to the Dowagers that you see in this picture, and the legs tend to be brighter color. You could probably already guess which one is the ruff, but you see here that the size between the Dowagers and the ruff is pretty similar. We've got the ruff in the middle and the long-billed Dowagers on all sides. I like to call the ruff the tiny head because to me, this rather chunky sandpiper always seems to have too small of a head for its body. Plus the bill is way shorter than most of our other shorebirds as far as the body size goes. So it seems oddly proportioned to me, like the tiny head. In this picture, we've got a ruff, a greater yellow legs, and a green-winged teal. Can you pick out the ruff? It's a little bit smaller than the greater yellow legs, but very, very similar otherwise, but I would draw your attention to the lack of spots on the ruff. The ruff has dark centered feathers, but it doesn't really have very many spots. The greater yellowlegs and all the tringas, for that matter, have spots. Willet, yellowlegs, solitary. Can you tell which one is the ruff here? Tiny head, short bill, no spots. You've got the ruff on the left and greater yellowlegs on the right. Good size comparison, greater and lesser yellowlegs. So much is made about the length of the bill. The length of the greater yellowleg's bill is longer than the length of its head. Where the lesser yellowlegs, the bill is about the same length as the head. This is often really useful, but I think, plus the sparser spotting on the breast of the lesser yellowlegs. So we've got lesser on the left and greater on the right. But I actually think looking at the structure is more important. Look at the different posture and the different body shape of these birds, particularly the kind of bulge in the neck of the greater yellowlegs. It's a longer necked bird with kind of an Adam's apple. The lesser yellowlegs is a little bit shorter necked, smoother bird, and to me, a little bit more gracefully proportioned, I suppose. Greater yellowlegs always seems a little gawky to me. Solitary sandpiper. This is one of the prized species of fall. Tends to follow freshwater waterways, creeks, rivers, reservoirs. You're actually, because you find them in that habitat, you're very likely to confuse it with spotted sandpiper. But I would take a look at how few spots are on the spotted sandpiper, especially the back. The back is spotless. Solitary sandpiper tends to show spots on the wings and the back. But you can see how these could be confused. They both have dull yellowish greenish legs, an eye ring, etc. And they're about the same size, and they both bob up and down. You could probably tell which one is the solitary here. We've got a lesser yellowlegs, and the solitary is a smaller bird. It's the one that's looking up, probably at a predator, like a falcon, perhaps. It's darker overall, and while the legs don't look very different in color here, if these weren't coated in mud, the solitary sandpiper would have sort of greenish olive legs, and the yellow legs would have bright yellow legs. Again here, lesser yellow legs and a solitary sandpiper. One of these birds has a strong eye ring, one does not. One has got bright yellow legs, the other one doesn't. We've got solitary sandpiper on the left and lesser yellow legs on the right. Solitary sandpiper has a dark centered tail, which is different from yellowlegs, which has a pale tail across the entire width. And when they land, they tend to hold their wings up for a moment, revealing a pretty dark underside of the wing. Compare that to lesser yellowlegs, which has bright white on the underside of the wings. So finally, dowagers. Ugh. I'm not going to talk very much about adult dowagers. This requires another class entirely, which there will be one. But for now, let's focus on the juveniles. Because in the late summer and the fall is when we see so many juvenile birds. And they're actually, in many ways, more easier to identify than the adults, especially with the dowagers. So the long-billed dowager, we see kind of a duller bird with any color, really restricted to the scapulars and the back. Whereas the short-billed dowager, on the right, we see a lot more gold suffusion, rufous suffusion across the entire upper parts. Most importantly, you see the tertials that the arrow is pointing to. They're clean and unpatterned in the long-billed, and they are definitely patterned with the really pretty tiger striping on the tertials of the short-billed dowager juvenile. So if you focus on those tertials and on the colorful juvenile birds, you should be able to tell which of these dowagers is which. You see the tiger striping in bird A, that's the short-billed dowager. The plain tertials are the long-billed dowager. Again, juveniles. This pattern on the short-billed dowitcher is not bars like the adults have. This is an internal pattern, little broken lines that fall within the edge of the tertials. You'd be surprised how easy that is to spot when you start looking for it. So I'm just going to end with a couple places to go to look for shorebirds, because we don't always know where to go to find the birds we're looking for. Our self-guided trips, of course, are really helpful in helping you figure out where to look. But I'll tell you right now, some of my favorite places are Palo Alto Baylands. Be careful to watch the tides. In order to see shorebirds, you really want a lower tide. For me, the best time to look for shorebirds is on a receding tide, when the tide is going out. Because as the tide recedes, the water reveals food that's available and close to the surface. The situation is different when the tide is rising. The creatures are too far beneath the surface of the mud for the birds to reach. So the receding tide is actually when the most active foraging takes place. Of course, Charleston Slough on the left and the Coast Casey Forebay on the right, at the end of Terminal and beside Shoreline Lake. And the Alviso Grand Boulevard, the entrance road to the EEC, one of the best places to look. Pectoral Sandpiper, Rough, Baird Sandpiper have all been here. Semi-palmated sandpipers have been here. I don't recall a solitary sandpiper here. They tend to fall into freshwater areas before these saline ponds, but you might still look for it here. So one of the best places to look, I'd say. A few quick resources. Get yourself a checklist if you don't already have it. We have them for free at the Nature Shop. If you're not in the habit of looking at eBird, take a look at the Search Photos and Sounds section right in the Explore page. And you'll find there that you can type in a species name. You can restrict it to a location or a date. But one of my favorite thing is to do, restrict it to show only images with multiple species. This way you can sort of test yourself like we've been doing here tonight. A few guides that are available. The Shorebird Guide is probably the best. We have a couple of copies at our bookshop. It's also available on Amazon and other book sources. And if you are interested, there's going to be a raptor class in August. Haven't quite scheduled it yet, but very soon, a 3-part class on raptors, hopefully to coincide with migration of our species. And also watch for, we're going to bring back gulls and flycatchers at the beginning of 2023. And sometimes sprinkled in there, we're going to have some habitats presentations, chaparral, oak savanna, tidal, as well as seasonal birding presentations. So a lot to look forward to. And with that, I'll just wrap it up. If anybody has any quick questions, I'm happy to answer. But if not, Barry, I think you have posted the auction link.
Carolyn has put it in the comments, and if you go to scvas.org, you will see it on the homepage. There is a link. So it's www.32auctions.com/2022-SCVAS. So the auction is now officially open.
How many days do we have to bid? How many days do we have to bid?
The auction will go for 2 weeks. It ends at midnight on August 6th. Let me double check that I'm not saying the wrong date.
So check just before midnight if there's something you really want.
Exactly.
Anyway, I want to thank you all for being here tonight.
Midnight on August 6th, yes.
I hope you enjoyed the program this evening, the interview and the presentation on shorebirds and all the updates, all the highlights of the year. Carolyn and Barry and Bob and Gary and Carter and everyone else who was here tonight. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting Audubon. Bill is going to send us out with some more music, hang out for a few minutes, and swing by the ranch sometime and say hello.
All right.
All right. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this evening's program. I'm going to send you out with a couple of tunes that seem appropriate to me while we can enjoy maybe our closing slideshow. Those of you who know my musical tastes know that I'm a huge fan of Brazilian composer Antonio Carlos Jobim, who wrote many of the famous bossa novas that some of you know. And there's hardly a more appropriate tune from the Jobim catalog than this one, which is called Look to the Sky. All right, friends, I think that's going to do it. Antonio Carlos Jobim competition, Look to the Sky. Thanks so much for being here tonight and for all your support of the chapter. It really means a lot to all of us. And get out there and see some birds, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.